The roar of motorcycle engines fills the air as a pack of bikers tears down the highway, their laughter echoing through the open road. These guys live for speed and adrenaline, always looking for their next thrill. But today, their fun takes a sharp turn when they spot an old, rugged semi-truck rumbling along the highway. The driver, a solitary man with a calm demeanor, doesn't look like much to them. A little gray in his beard, a weathered baseball cap pulled low, and sunglasses that hide his eyes. To the bikers, he's just another easy target for their antics. They rev their engines, weaving dangerously close to the truck, throwing exaggerated gestures and yelling taunts. To their surprise, the man doesn't react. He simply keeps driving, his face calm and unreadable. The lack of response only fuels their boldness. They're laughing, egging each other on, pushing their luck further. What they don't know is that this isn't just any truck driver. Behind that calm exterior is a retired Special Forces captain, a man who's seen and done things they couldn't even imagine. Trained in survival, strategy, and combat, he's the kind of person you don't want to push too far. He doesn't look for trouble, but trouble has a way of finding him. As the bikers close in, their antics escalating, the driver makes a slight adjustment to his rearview mirror. For the first time, there's a flicker of something in his expression. Not fear, not anger, but something calculated, almost amused. And then it happens, a moment that changes everything. A sudden maneuver, a subtle signal, and the game they thought they were playing flips on its head. Who's really in control now? You'll have to watch the full story to find out. Buckle up, this is one ride you don't want to miss. The bikers were still laughing, oblivious to the shift in tone. To them, it was all a harmless game, a little highway fun to pass the time. They zigzagged around the truck, revving their engines louder, one of them even leaning close enough to tap on the massive side mirror as he sped past. The driver didn't flinch. He didn't honk, didn't shout, didn't so much as glance out the window. But inside the cab, he was watching. Every move, every sound, every gesture. It was all catalogued with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime assessing threats. His name was Jack, though no one had called him that in years. To most, he was just another long-haul trucker. But to those who knew his past, he was a man you didn't mess with. Special Forces had been his world once. Missions in places no one dared talk about, decisions that had to be made in seconds, and the kind of discipline most people couldn't even comprehend. Jack had left that life behind years ago, trading chaos for the open road. The solitude suited him. It gave him time to think, to be away from the noise. But old habits die hard, and the instincts that had kept him alive in the field never really left. Through the side mirror, he watched the bikers regroup, their body language shifting slightly. Were they planning something more? His eyes narrowed behind his sunglasses as he considered his options. He didn't want trouble, but trouble seemed intent on finding him today. One biker, the leader of the group by the look of it, signaled to the others. They fanned out, surrounding the truck. Jack's grip on the wheel tightened ever so slightly. He could feel the tension building, the air practically crackling with it. They thought they had him cornered, that they were in control, but they had no idea who they were dealing with or what he was capable of when pushed too far. What happens next might just leave them wishing they'd taken a different road. The highway stretched on, an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through a remote expanse of wilderness. The bikers had tightened their formation around Jack's truck, revving their engines in a show of dominance. They were close now, too close. Jack could hear the rumble of their motorcycles even over the growl of his engine. He remained calm, his face unreadable, but his mind was already working through the situation, analyzing every detail. The leader of the bikers, a cocky young man with a bandana tied around his head, pulled up alongside Jack's window. He motioned with his hand, signaling Jack to pull over. The others followed suit, closing in tighter, effectively cutting him off from every side. Jack glanced at them through the side mirror, his expression still neutral. This wasn't his first standoff, though these guys had no way of knowing that. At the warehouse, one of the captors stepped into the room where Emma was being held. He was younger than the others, his movements hesitant as he set a bottle of water down in front of her. "Don't try anything," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Emma noticed the small tremor in his hand. He was scared, not of her, but of whoever was in charge. She decided to test the waters. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. He froze, glancing nervously toward the door before quickly walking out. Outside, Jack parked a block away, stepping into the shadows to assess the area. He noticed subtle signs of security, guards stationed at entrances, poorly hidden cameras, but he dealt with worse. As he moved closer, he caught sight of something that made his stomach tighten. A symbol spray-painted on the building, a logo tied to a criminal syndicate he thought he'd buried years ago. This wasn't just about Emma. This was personal. Jack crouched in the shadows, his breathing steady, his senses sharp. The symbol on the warehouse wall brought back memories he'd buried deep. Missions gone wrong. Enemies he thought were long gone. If this syndicate was involved, then Emma wasn't just a random target. They wanted to send him a message, but they underestimated him. They always did. Inside, Emma worked quietly to loosen the zip ties around her wrists, inching the sharp edge of the nail she'd found against the plastic. Her heart raced with every scrape, terrified that one of the guards would hear her. The man who had brought her water hadn't returned, and she couldn't tell if that was a good or bad sign. She just knew she had to act fast. The muffled voices outside the room were growing louder. Something was happening. In a small control room overlooking the warehouse, two men monitored the live feed from their security cameras. One of them leaned closer to the screen. "Who is that?" he asked, pointing to a shadowy figure moving near the perimeter. "No one's supposed to be out there." The other man grabbed a radio. "Check the north side, now." Jack watched as one of the guards stepped out, scanning the area with a flashlight. He waited until the man turned his back before striking, swift and silent. Dragging the unconscious body into the shadows, he took the guard's radio and earpiece, slipping them on. Static filled his ears before a voice came through. "North side clear. No sign of movement." Jack smirked, his voice calm as he replied, "Copy that." Emma had finally loosened the ties around her wrists when the door creaked open. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. One of the men stepped inside, his eyes narrowing when he saw her hands. "What are you?" he started, but before he could finish, a deafening sound echoed through the warehouse, a carefully placed explosive set off by Jack to create chaos. The lights flickered, and shouts erupted as the building plunged into confusion. Emma seized the moment, grabbing the nail and slashing at the man's arm, bolting toward the door as he stumbled back. Outside, Jack moved with precision, using the chaos to his advantage. He was getting closer, but so were they. Emma sprinted through the dimly lit corridors of the warehouse, her pulse pounding like a drum. The shouts of her captors echoed behind her, their footsteps closing in. She didn't know where she was going, she just knew she had to keep moving. The flickering lights cast erratic shadows on the walls, making every corner feel like a trap. But then she saw it, a faint glow from an exit sign at the end of the hall. Freedom felt just within reach. Jack, meanwhile, was cutting through the chaos like a force of nature. Every movement was calculated, every step deliberate. He had taken out 2 more guards and was now inside the warehouse, navigating the maze of crates and machinery. The radio in his ear crackled with frantic voices. "She's heading toward the east exit." One of them barked. Jack's grip on his weapon tightened. East exit, he was close. Emma burst through the exit door, gasping for air as she stumbled into the night. But instead of finding open space, she froze. A sleek black car was parked just outside, its engine idling. A man stood by the driver's side, his silhouette sharp and imposing under the dim glow of a street lamp. This wasn't one of the men who had taken her. He was different, calm, composed, dangerous. The night was calm, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen. But in a dimly lit alley, shadows moved with a purpose. A black SUV rolled up, tires crunching against the gravel. Inside, the mafia crew exchanged silent nods. They had their orders: find the girl, make her disappear. To them, it was just another job, another payday. What they didn't know was that this was no ordinary girl. Emma, an independent and spirited college student, had just finished a late-night study session with friends. As she walked home, her headphones in, she didn't notice the dark figures trailing her. She had no idea her life was about to take a terrifying turn. The men grabbed her, quick and calculated, muffling her screams and dragging her into the SUV. In their minds, she was just leverage, a pawn in their endless games of power and intimidation. But Emma wasn't just anyone. She was the daughter of a man whose name alone struck fear into the hearts of the most dangerous criminals. Her father, Colonel Jack "Ghost" Morgan, was no stranger to violence. A decorated Marine with a reputation for being the most lethal force the U.S. Navy had ever seen, Jack had spent years dismantling entire terrorist networks overseas. What made him truly terrifying wasn't just his skills, it was his relentless drive when it came to protecting those he loved. Back at home, Jack was sipping his morning coffee when his phone buzzed. A chilling video message appeared. Emma, bound and frightened, her captors' faces masked, their voices distorted as they demanded a hefty ransom. Jack's hand trembled, not with fear, but with fury. The mafia had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had no idea they'd just declared war on the deadliest man alive. And Jack, he was already planning how to bring every one of them down. Jack stared at the video on his phone, his jaw clenched so tightly it felt like it might snap. He replayed it, studying every detail: the faint echo of voices in the background, the flickering light overhead, the shadow of a man's hand gripping Emma's shoulder. He knew she was trying to stay strong, but the fear in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. These men were dangerous, but they had no clue who they were messing with. Jack wasn't just a Marine, he was a strategist. He'd spent years learning how to think 10 steps ahead of his enemies. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to use leverage against him, but it would be the last time anyone made the mistake of targeting his family. He grabbed his laptop and logged into a private military-grade system. Within minutes, he had the video analyzed, tracing the IP address to a city 2 hours away. It was a lead, but not enough. Meanwhile, in a rundown warehouse, Emma sat on a cold metal chair, her wrists bound tightly with zip ties. She tried to steady her breathing, replaying the self-defense lessons her dad had drilled into her when she was younger. Stay calm, observe everything, look for a way out. The men hadn't spoken to her much, but she could tell by their nervous energy that they weren't seasoned criminals. They were amateurs, pawns in a larger game. But who was pulling the strings? And why her? As Jack pieced together clues, his mind raced with questions. Was this a random act, or had someone deliberately chosen his daughter, knowing who he was? If they knew his history, they would have known better than to provoke him. That meant one thing: they didn't know. Jack's phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Coordinates. No message, just numbers. A trap, he thought, but it didn't matter. He was going, and whoever was waiting for him had no idea the storm that was coming. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she sat in silence, listening to the faint sounds of the men arguing in the next room. Their voices were muffled, but she could pick up fragments. This wasn't part of the deal, one of them said, his tone tense. You think the boss cares? We do what we're told, another snapped. Emma leaned slightly forward, her eyes scanning the room for anything she could use. A loose nail on the floor caught her attention, and she made a mental note to inch closer when she got the chance. If her dad had taught her anything, it was that survival came down to small opportunities, and she wasn't giving up without a fight. Jack, meanwhile, was driving toward the coordinates with laser focus, his mind running through every possible scenario. The car was silent except for the faint buzz of a secure earpiece he'd connected to a former Marine buddy, Nick. Jack wasn't about to walk into this blind. The coordinates lead to an abandoned industrial area. Nick's voice came through. But I'm picking up chatter on a private frequency. Someone's expecting company. Jack smirked grimly. Good, let them.